Intro. In a world that never stops talking, silence has become almost a stranger. We live surrounded by constant noise, podcasts, opinions, debates, and endless updates. Everyone wants to be heard, but very few ever stop to listen. Yet the Stoics believe that the greatest truths are not shouted, they're whispered. Marcus Aurelius often wrote in his journal, not to convince others, but to remind himself to return to stillness, to listen to the quiet voice of reason that only speaks when the mind stops performing. Seneca warned that people who talk too much rarely learn anything new, because their words drown out wisdom before it can reach them. And Epictetus taught that silence is not absence, it is awareness. So, what happens when you stop trying to fill every pause with sound and let the world breathe? You begin to hear things you've never noticed before. The rhythm of your thoughts, the weight of your emotions, the voice of life itself. This episode isn't about silence as an escape. It's about silence as a return to presence, to peace, and to power. Because life has been speaking to you all along. You just needed to stop talking long enough to listen. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the noise of modern life, or wondered why peace feels so far away, this message is for you. Before we begin, take a deep breath. And if you find value in these reflections, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers, where ancient wisdom meets the modern world. And every story reminds you how to live with depth, clarity, and calm. Now, let's step into the quiet, where life finally starts to speak. 1. The noise that drowns the soul. We wake up to noise before we even open our eyes. Notifications, headlines, opinions. 1,000 voices pulling at our attention before we've had a single clear thought. And the strange thing is, we've begun to mistake this noise for life itself. The Stoics would say this is the first illusion of modern existence, the belief that being busy means being alive. But Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, if you seek tranquility, do less. He didn't mean laziness, he meant doing only what matters. Because the mind that's always reacting never reflects. We fill every pause with something: music, podcasts, conversations that go nowhere. Terrified of the quiet because it might show us who we really are. We talk not to communicate, but to avoid hearing the silence underneath. And slowly, we drown, not in water, but in words. Seneca once wrote, "It is better to be silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt." He wasn't mocking ignorance, he was warning us about ego. The ego that wants to sound wise, instead of being wise. When you talk too much, you stop listening, and when you stop listening, the soul begins to starve. No wonder so many people feel empty even while surrounded by sound. Because wisdom doesn't live in noise, it lives in stillness. Imagine a lake in a storm, waves crashing, reflections broken. That's what your mind becomes when it's full of noise. But when the storm passes, the surface clears, and truth finally appears. Silence, then, is not an escape from life, it's a return to it. The world doesn't need you to speak louder. It needs you to listen deeper. 2. Silence, the mirror of the mind. When the noise finally fades, something strange begins to happen. You start hearing a different kind of sound, not from the world, but from within. It's uncomfortable at first, because silence holds up a mirror. And in that mirror, there are no filters, no masks, only you. Most people are afraid of silence because it exposes what they've been running from. The thoughts they've buried, the emotions they've postponed, the truth they've been too busy to face. But that's exactly why the Stoics saw silence as a discipline, not a luxury. Marcus Aurelius didn't meditate to escape, he did it to see himself clearly. Seneca wrote that, "A man who is always among others forgets how to be himself." When you are never alone, you live as a reflection of the crowd, mimicking opinions, chasing approval, losing the shape of your own soul. But when you sit quietly, without distraction or applause, you begin to meet the person beneath the performance. Silence reveals how restless the mind truly is, how it jumps from regret to worry to desire. At first, it feels chaotic, but stay a little longer, and the noise begins to settle, like dust in sunlight. In that stillness, patterns appear, the reasons behind your pain, the stories you've told yourself, the values you've neglected. That is the moment of truth. Because when the mind stops pretending, it starts healing. The mirror of silence doesn't lie, it simply reflects what is. And once you dare to look, you can finally choose what to change. 3. Listening to what life is saying. Once the mind grows quiet, something begins to shift. The world doesn't seem as loud anymore, not because it changed, but because you did. You start noticing the pauses between the noise, the way the wind hums through the trees, the way someone's silence carries more truth than their words. Epictetus once reminded his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." To the Stoics, listening was not just hearing, it was understanding. It meant being present enough to sense what life was whispering beneath the chaos. When you slow down, you realize life is always speaking. Through the tension in your shoulders, through the tears you hide, through the way certain people make your heart feel either heavy or light. Every emotion, every obstacle, every unexpected delay, they all speak the same language. Pay attention. The problem is, most of us are too busy trying to control life to listen to it. We want answers fast, we want progress visible, we want certainty now. But life doesn't shout its wisdom, it waits for silence. The lesson you've been missing might already be around you, echoing softly in conversations, mistakes, or quiet moments before sleep. Marcus Aurelius would write late at night, listening not to the city outside, but to his own reason within. He believed that nature speaks to those who are still enough to hear. And maybe that's what listening truly means. Not seeking meaning, but allowing it to reveal itself. So the next time life feels silent, don't rush to fill it with noise. That silence is the message. 4. The strength hidden in stillness. Stillness has never been weakness. It is the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to prove, it simply is. In a world that glorifies speed, control, and reaction, stillness becomes an act of quiet rebellion. It's the courage to pause when everyone else rushes, to breathe when chaos demands your rage, to choose peace when pride begs for a fight. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He understood that restraint is not suppression, it's mastery. When you remain calm in the face of insult or injustice, you show that your emotions serve you, not the other way around. That is the essence of Stoic strength. Power without noise, confidence without display. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing only what aligns with your values, and letting go of what doesn't. It's how you reclaim control from the chaos. Because storms aren't defeated by shouting at the rain. They're endured by those who stand firm until the clouds pass. Seneca called it the art of endurance. He believed a wise person doesn't resist reality, he flows with it. Like a river moving around stones. True strength isn't in domination, but in understanding. It's the quiet realization that you can't control what happens. But you can always control the space between event and reaction. And that space, that pause, is where power lives. Stillness gives you clarity. It lets you see what matters and what doesn't. In a restless world, the calm one becomes unshakable. Outro. And so, when all the words fade, what remains is truth. Silence has been speaking to you this whole time, not through noise, but through understanding. The Stoics knew that wisdom isn't found in the crowd, nor in constant motion, but in that quiet space where thought and soul finally meet. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That retreat isn't somewhere far away, it's right here, inside you, each time you pause before reacting. Each time you listen instead of rushing to reply. Each time you choose peace instead of pride. You're practicing Stoicism in its truest form. And maybe that's what this whole journey is about. Learning to hear life when it stops screaming. Because life isn't trying to drown you. It's trying to teach you, guide you, and remind you that peace is not lost, just buried beneath the noise. If this message spoke to you, even quietly, take a moment to let it stay with you. And if you believe the world needs more of this stillness, more calm voices in the storm, share this video with someone who's been searching for peace too. Leave a comment. Tell me what silence has taught you. Did it comfort you, challenge you, change you? Your story might be the mirror someone else needs. And if you haven't yet, like this video, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers, and join a community where ancient wisdom finds a home in modern hearts. Here, we don't just think, we listen, we reflect, and we grow. So until next time, remember, when you stop talking, life starts speaking. And when you listen, you begin to truly live.